Hello there. Welcome everyone to what promises to be a thrilling conversation today. My name is John Lustrea. I'm the Education Coordinator at the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. I'm really excited to be joined by the good folks from Richmond National Battlefield Park. Is it National Battlefield Park?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All the Park Service sites have these slightly different variations. So thrilled to be joined by staff and volunteers from Richmond National Battlefield Park. Got Bert Dunkerley, give a wave, Bert. Mike Gorman here as well. Roger, one of the volunteers. And we got Jean as well joining us, another volunteer. And they're all here to talk about an incredible project, one that I'm very excited to see come to fruition, the Chimborazo Records Project. And they'll get into all the specifics of that in just a minute. I want to say before we get the ball rolling, A, thanks for tuning in. We're thrilled you're watching with us. B, one of the ways you can help not just the museum, but also this project in general. If you like the video, you share the video, that gets more people, that helps more people see it, which of course helps the museum and helps, further videos like this. And we really appreciate all of that. So that's something everyone can do very easily for free. Like and share, that helps us out immensely. Tell your friends about it who you think might be interested. And the best way to support the museum is to become a member of the museum. Members like you are how we how we're able to continue bringing programming like this to you. So if you've enjoyed this video or other videos that we've done over the course of the last year, becoming a member is the best way to ensure there will continue to be more videos like this. I'll also, we'll make sure we mention how you can get involved with this project should you feel so moved before we get to before the end of the video. But there's a number of ways to get involved and support incredible historical research like we're going to talk about here today. So with all of that said, I know I'm really excited to hear about this project, and I think you will be too if you're interested in Civil War medicine. So with all that said, I'm going to turn things here over to Bert.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you partnering with us for this program. I'm Ranger Bert Dunkerley, and I'm with Richmond National Battlefield Park. Our park is a little bit unusual from other battlefield parks in that we preserve the battlefield sites around Richmond. We preserve 4,000 acres in and around the city of Richmond in the 3 surrounding counties. And some of our more famous sites include Cold Harbor, Gaines's Mill, and Malvern Hill. We also preserve the site of the Chimborazo Hospital. Now, a lot of battlefield parks, excuse me, preserve field hospital sites, but we preserve an actual permanent hospital site at Chimborazo. Chimborazo was established in 1861, then on the outskirts of the city. Today, there is a medical museum with some great exhibits about Chimborazo itself and the other hospitals in Richmond and Civil War medicine. Now, the first thing you're probably wondering is, where does the name come from? That is something we've struggled with. Chimborazo is named after a mountain in Ecuador. Now, why this hill in Richmond is named after a mountain in South America, we're not quite sure. But the area was called Chimborazo before the Civil War. When the hospital was established, it's going to occupy 40 acres. It's going to have over 100 structures. And throughout the course of the war, it's going to accommodate about 70,000 patients. We're still honing in on that final number. At any given time, there were probably 3,000 to 4,000 patients at the hospital. Massive facility. Now, Chimborazo was run by a doctor named Dr. James McCaw, native of Richmond. And the hospital is going to be divided into 5 divisions. And each of those divisions has a surgeon in charge. medically trained doctor. And to support this huge operation, there are over 500 people working at the hospital. That's going to include nurses who are male, matrons, female, stewards, cooks, vast number of support staff. A number of free and enslaved African Americans also work at Chimborazo. A lot of the people working there are doing their part to support the cause. Conscription is in place, so a lot of the males are off with the military. So it's an opportunity for women to step in and support the war effort in that way. Chimborazo is going to receive a lot of patients who have already been treated elsewhere, maybe on the battlefield or at another medical facility. The vast majority of patients will arrive to Richmond by rail. Rail lines come into the city from every direction, and from whatever campsite or battlefield they may be coming from, they'll arrive and move into Chimborazo. The hospital separated patients by state and also by ailment or condition. Like every other part of the Confederacy, they're going to suffer shortages and feel the effects of the economy as it goes downhill over the course of the war. But Dr. McCaw did an outstanding job of ensuring that the hospital had medical supplies and food and was able to take good care of its patients. The hospital is a Confederate military hospital. So all of the doctors are Confederate Army officers, and the hospital is supplied through the Confederate government, funded and supplied through the military system. And McCaw is going to leverage that to supply the hospital. He will also work with local farms to provide produce and bring fresh food to the hospital from the nearby county. And they even had their own river barge to bring supplies to the hospital. Most of you probably know that at this time in American history, most people didn't go to big hospitals. Big hospitals didn't exist. This is kind of a new phenomenon. The soldiers who came through Chimborazo had a very positive experience. A lot of them talk about receiving good care at Chimborazo. The soldiers were all given a bath regularly. They had meals specifically catered to their needs. And a lot of them are going to talk about that positive experience from this large hospital complex. Now, the patients who pass through Chimborazo, and they will include men from every southern state, if they recover and are well, they'll return to their units. If they are unable to fully recover, they'll be sent home. Many are transferred to other hospitals for further care and treatment, and some will pass away. And there is a nearby cemetery called Oakwood Cemetery, which has a large Confederate section where a lot of the Chimborazo patients are buried. Now, the original records for the Chimborazo Hospital are in the National Archives. And the park, thankfully, has made microfilm copies of those records. And the patient ledgers that we have on microfilm include information like the patient's name, rank and unit, their condition or ailment, date of admission, and their fate, usually. As we'll get into it, the records are not always up to par. Well, the park has had these records for quite a while, and we've often talked about the need to transcribe these records and make them accessible. Think about all the great information we could learn about the hospital, the medical system, the fate and experiences of all these soldiers. It's a massive project, and it's something that we've talked about and has even been attempted in the past, but never got very far. And I think it took the right combination of people to bring this together. because we're now almost 3 years into this project. So that's a little background on the hospital itself. I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and he'll talk about the project in more detail.
Well, thank you, Bert. I'm Ranger Mike Gorman. I'm one of the historians for the Richmond National Battlefield Park. And one of the things that kind of set me on my path as a working Civil War historian way back in the day, as Bert mentioned, our historian Bobby Crick had these mission records microfilmed. Now, we have them in the basement, but they're huge. There's so much there, and there really wasn't a practical way to do this. But we were getting more interested in what had happened at the hospital and sort of realizing collectively that we didn't know much, and there hadn't been a whole lot of good research done at all about the hospital. There had been a published book about the hospital based on what was then available in the 90s, and the famous A Southern Woman's Story by Phoebe Pember, which all of you should read. It is just fantastic. She was one of the matrons at Chimborazo Hospital and turned in an amazing memoir. But beyond that, we really didn't have much original primary sources. So, I was a young, starving, seasonal historian, and you can tell how long ago that was. They sent me up to the National Archives to look at all the records of the hospital, primarily to establish who was working there. So I was really looking at employment records, how many women worked there, how many slaves, how many male slaves, how many female slaves. And by the way, the overwhelming majority of the workforce were enslaved African Americans. That was somewhat interesting, because the mythology tells us that during the Civil War, white womanhood flocked to the hospitals, bringing pies and cakes and, caring for the men. Well, it was a military post, wouldn't work. So, you start to see a different story emerging, and that really got me interested. Whenever you see, those narratives somewhat subverted, you go, what else is here? So while I was up there, I looked at the records of the hospital, the letters coming and going, and transcribing those, and it was just amazing, what we were pulling out of there in terms of day-to-day operations, and it was just gold. And to this day, I get a little tingle going down my spine as I remember just that new frontier of stuff that nobody had seen before. But yet those microfilm reels remained down in the basement at Chimborazo. It's not minimizing what they are. They are the admission records of Chimborazo Hospital. But way back in the day, we're talking, 100 years ago, clerks at the War Department had already gone through those and cross-referenced the names into the service record. So it's not like you couldn't find this out, that a soldier had been at Chimborazo, but you'd be doing it soldier by soldier, you see, looking at the individual compiled service record. But this is everything. And what this will tell us, if we can find a way to do it, is the trends of the hospital. How many people are coming in at particular times? What were they coming in with? Not just individually, but collectively. And boy, I always wanted to do it, but the problem was it's huge, absolutely gargantuan. And once we got that information, how would we compile it? Would we have a database? Would we have a spreadsheet? How would people get at it? Once we found the name, is the name correct? You start to realize that this is a huge project. And at the time, in the early 2000s, it frankly wasn't time yet. So I say that this project is really a perfect storm of timing. We've got the time, a whole lot of it thanks to COVID, but we've got the technology. For instance, all the compiled service records have been digitized. You can go online and look at them. So, if there's something that comes up in our transcription and it's a little wonky, maybe that name doesn't seem to spell right, or you can go and look. And we've been able to establish a great team of people, so it's not just one person sitting there grinding away for decades, because that's what I imagined it would be. So the project itself kind of grew out of this, well, I'll take a step back. I had been kind of maniacally working at researching Chimborazo. I hope I really do, that I don't go to my grave not having the answer for why is it called Chimborazo. So this is an almost weekly quest. Just anytime I, search for anything I can think of. And so I've been establishing this huge source file of things that I found. And one of the things that started to emerge was that nobody, in addition to doing very little for the wartime stuff, it had a post-war story, folks. Turns out after the war, almost immediately, the Freedmen's Bureau took it over, and this became a Freedmen's Village. The first home of these formerly enslaved African Americans was at Chimborazo. I didn't know anything about that. Nobody I knew anything about it. And it really kind of shows you how historians kind of pick their era, and they put their little blinders on, and it's you don't go over here, you don't go over here. Well, shame on us. And so I really threw myself down this rat hole of looking at the Freedmen's Bureau records. The city directories include the names of the people who were living up there. So now we're getting this huge, complete picture. I call it the kitchen sink mentality of, what was going on at Chimborazo. So I'm getting the names of people who lived there after the war. I'm getting what the Freedmen's Bureau was doing up there. I'm getting information about racial violence that took place. And there's a lot of records about that. It's really cool. And it just sort of stuck in my craw that, the biggest thing that we needed to do hadn't been done yet. And so this is kind of, again, that perfect storm forming. And this kind of comes to a head, I think, well, Jean had something to do. I think she'll talk to this in a little bit. But Bobby Crick and I had encountered various volunteers over the years who had tried to, or got excited about doing this, going in and transcribing all the records. But I mean, I'm guessing conservatively, I'm thinking probably 8 or 9 different people had come in. And so I had been put in a position of establishing, if we do this, here's the format we'll use in terms of a spreadsheet. So that existed, but every time somebody would come in, we'd be like, oh man, they're gonna do this for a month and they're gonna get fed up, and it's just gonna die on the vine. Because when you're running a visitor center, you can't sit behind a microfilm machine. So again, this perfect storm is starting to form. And in sort of a personal level, I had my own microfilm machine. Well, but I think it's at Roger's house right now. I had been kind of sad because I would spend a lot of nights, very late, transcribing newspapers articles, but then they got digitized. And so, this is prime real estate on my desk. And, it kind of came the day where I was like, I'm going to put it in the attic. And, I might have rolled a tear, but there it was, in the attic, when one of our volunteers right there, Gene kind of got excited about this and wanted to do it. And so out came the microfilm machine down into the Chimborazo basement. I had an old laptop that I could still force to work. And we set up this workstation down there. And this project just came into practicality, and it became a team. Volunteers wanted to be part of this. And all of a sudden now, I'm looking at the spreadsheet coming in, and, starts with, 100 are there. All of a sudden there's 400. What? This is going fast. And I'm sitting here realizing that, this isn't going to die on the vine. And this is some of the most important research we can do. So I took it upon myself is, okay, as these names get transcribed, now I'm going to take that spreadsheet and I'm going to go hunt these guys and find their service records, find out what their name actually was, right? Because I'm fully convinced, and Gene, maybe you've seen the same thing, but I believe that these are really admission records, that this is just a transcribed list of people who came in off the ambulance. And it was often phonetic. If the guy's name was McPhee, you might see it MCFEE rather than his actual name, which you can find by looking at his service record, which was PHE, and these kind of things. So now that can become a genealogical tool for somebody one day, right? Where was he from? I want to know that. So I put that in there too. So now we're getting, we don't just have the information from the admission records, but we have data. somebody can go further. Somebody can find these people in the census, find out what happened to them after the war. That's beyond our project. But what we feel really strongly about is that this is the foundation for hopefully countless research projects in the future, because we will have a grid sample size. We will be able to know more than we ever had and fill out that story that we just didn't have. There's going to be all kinds of trends that we'll establish. There's going to be all kinds of, well, here's a great one. What constitutes a patient? Now, this is a real question. Bert mentioned that somewhere around 70,000 went through Chimborazo, right? Okay. Well, here's the trick. A guy comes into division number 2, suffering with, I'm making this up, chronic diarrhea. Boy, is that a common one. He's suffering with chronic diarrhea. But then in his service record, 2 weeks later, you see him transferred to division number 4. And he's got an admission record for division number 4. Is he 1 patient or is he 2 patients? He might even get transferred again to division number 5. Is he 3 patients or is he just 1? That's a real question. So, at the same time we're getting this information, we're also, as often is the case, raising more questions, right? And that's a good problem to have. Historians love this. History isn't fixed. It should always move. It should always be developed. We should always be finding this kind of stuff and forcing us to ask those kind of questions. I love that. That's just fantastic. And like I said, I hope that this is the kind of stuff that will go into the future and have ripples beyond us, ways we can't really even imagine. I don't think there's ever been a considered effort to transcribe the records of any other hospital. I hope there will be. I would love to see, one of the Washington, D.C. hospitals, one of the biggies there. How does it compare, right? Numbers wise, disease wise. Wouldn't that be fascinating to know? I would love to know that. So this isn't a manifesto for transcriptionists out there to go get busy. It is just a start. And again, if it hadn't been for those microfilms sitting in the basement, mocking me for years and years, and the time and talent that we have today, as well as the technology, they probably would still be sitting there. And I can't stress enough. It's just been that perfect storm, and it's very, very exciting. We are not going to be done this year, maybe not even next year. Finding these guys is going to take a long time. It's what I do all day, every day, sometimes very late into the day. And I love doing it. So don't get excited that, I've got a link for you that you can click and see it right now. But there will be one day. And I can't wait to see what everyone's going to do with it. I hope I live to see it. But I'd kind of like to bring our volunteers in because they're the heart and soul of this thing. I can't find the guys if they don't transcribe the names. And I'd like to really kind of start with Jean. I want her to tell the story, but how did you get involved with this? What got you going about this project?
Hi, I'm Jean Hemphill. I'm a volunteer at the Richmond National Battlefield Park. I've always been interested in Civil War, as all of our volunteers are very interested in the topic. I'm originally from Appomattox. I was a Civil War reenactor for years, so I have lots of Civil War background. But I had 8 great-great-grandfathers who served with the Confederacy. 2 of them died in Richmond of disease. 1 of them died at Chimborazo. So when Bobby and Mike and Bert all said at one point or another, one of these days we have got to transcribe all these records, I just said, oh, I'll do it. Just shut up, I'll do it. So, and I don't mind minutia. I don't mind doing all that kind of, grinding work. It doesn't bother me at all. But I am particularly interested because I have a personal stake in it. I want to see handwritten by the clerk the name of my great-great-grandfather, Daniel Holt, died, Chimborazo, division number 5. I want to see it written out. I know I can look at his records in fold 3, which I've done before. I've done a lot of genealogy work, which is another reason I can do this a little bit better than some people, because I can read 19th century handwriting a little bit better. So in 19th century handwriting can be tricky, as Roger will tell you. You get different clerks after a day or two, and you have to start all over learning the way they write particular letters. So I started transcribing. My sister and I actually started transcribing originally. It's just so fascinating to read each one of these stories, and each one is a real person, and I just really feel it. Here's a soldier from, right now I'm working in South Carolina, but here's the soldier from Appomattox, Virginia, and he comes in and he's got chronic diarrhea, and he comes in on this date, and a couple of days later you read across the page and the microfilm, and he dies. You know, it hurts to see them die because they're real people. And all of us feel this way. And, you know, these are not just records. So, and I know that both of my great-great-grandfathers who died in Richmond are both buried at Oakwood. So Bobby told me kind of, you know, about where they're buried because they don't have tombstones. So it's just so fascinating to be able to get this close to them. Because I've been able to find all the others and find their tombstones, but these two I could not find. So this has been a wonderful project for me. So once I started this, and then we got more volunteers that were really interested and thought I was having too good of a time. So they wanted to do it too. So we got a bunch of other volunteers, like Roger and his wife, Linda, are working on it right now. My niece, Erin Till, has done a lot of work on it. And so when we were, you know, working regularly before COVID, we would all go to the basement at Chimborazo, and we worked for a few hours at a time and transcribed what we could. And then COVID came along. Erin took the microfilm machine, the reader, for a while. She transcribed quite a bit, and now it's with Roger and Linda, and they're transcribing quite a bit. And once all of it, at some point, Mike takes what we have done, combines it in various regiments of the particular states, and hands it off to me or to himself or to a couple of other volunteers who are checking what we've done. Because I know there's sometimes I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure. You can't tell if it's an F or a T. You certainly can't tell if it's an I or a J. They look exactly the same. So, I mean, there were many times that I was just really afraid that I was transcribing incorrect information. So I am checking whatever Mike sends me. Right now, my job is to check from that information that we've transcribed against Fold 3 and correct anything that we've done. So now, Roger can tell you with more detail just how troublesome some of this information can be.
Yeah, Roger, what brought you to the project? How's the transcription going?
Okay, that's two questions. First of all, my wife and I, Linda and I, were both graduates from Gettysburg College. That's our connection initially to the Civil War. We are interested in historical things. We were at a volunteer dinner for the volunteers when Jean mentioned that she wanted to do this project, and we both said, well, I guess we can help out with that. So we've had maybe a dozen volunteers, I think, working in the basement from time to time. And then when the COVID hit, that all came to a halt. So right now, I have the microfilm reader right over here over my shoulder. Just looking at my notes, I think that Linda and I have transcribed about 5,000 records in the last couple of months. You can't do it all day. We do try to do some at least 5 or 6 days a week, maybe for like an hour at a time. The records are written in ledger books. You see two faces of a ledger. So you have the name, rank, their military unit, the date they were admitted oftentimes hits right in the fold of the 2 pages. That's a little bit of a problem sometimes. Their disease, and they try to record what happened to them. Were they transferred to another hospital or a private residence? Did they go back to their unit? Did they die? Were they furloughed, discharged? and our hope for this is that we'll get a greater appreciation for what these frontline soldiers endured during the war. It's just amazing to look at the list of conditions that they have. Diarrhea, dysentery, typhoid, measles and mumps. And many of them coming in with measles are listed as having died at the hospital. And while it's not a disease, debility is often often mentioned as a reason for them coming in, which I suspect is what we might today call post-traumatic stress, or they're just worn out. And I think that the data, when we get this done, is going to really underscore the terrible conditions these frontline soldiers endured in the war. Unfortunately, many of the records are incomplete. For instance, I think it was just a couple of months ago, we're transcribing right now 1862, and I think it was March. We had about 1,000 admissions, and there was no reason given for the admission. We have the name, rank, etc., and the date they came in, but we don't know what their condition was. Earlier, we were doing records from the end of the war, because these records are not filmed chronologically. The dates are all mixed together. But for the last 1,300 admissions, there is no record of what happened to them. Did they deceased, or did they transfer to another unit? We just don't know for the last 1,300 of them. A major challenge we face is reading 19th century handwriting. It's very florid handwriting, and it's a challenge. Luckily, Linda is doing the reading. Linda reads the information to me, and I'm the one doing the typing. So I'm typing it into our spreadsheet. In the mid-war, we found that a lot of records were alphabetized. They were recorded in alphabetical order, and that was a real help to understand some of the handwriting. But late in the war, and what we're working on now, early war, they just recorded them as they got them, I guess, and we don't have that aid. And we're also finding that it's sometimes there's a different clerk involved. We had a page recently where the person who recorded the condition or the disease was probably not the one who recorded the names and the date. That must have been done at another time. Another challenge is that the clerks use some rather original phonetic spellings, like Maryland for Maryland, or Alabama for Alabama, and some other phonetic spellings for names. I think, Mike, you mentioned that. And some diseases are recorded in rather phonetic spellings. And I think it was mid-war, when we were doing records from like 1864, we sometimes got in a remarks column the age and the occupation of the soldier. And there's not a lot of that, but that's something that's probably going to be pretty useful for some researchers to find out, to be able to document the ages of these people and what they did before the war.
Those are usually the wounded, aren't they, Roger?
Yeah, yes, those would be, that was not with the people who came in by disease, but those who came in with what would look like battle wounds, right?
And it even mentions where they were wounded: Spotsylvania, Gettysburg, so forth.
Yes, that's correct.
I also want to mention we've been working on this, I think, about 3 years so far. And when we first started, we anticipated that it would be about a 5-year project. And we're pretty far along. Mike says maybe 2 years. I think it might be just another year before we're finished, because the microfilm is divided into 5 roles. There are 5 divisions in the hospital. And each role goes through the entire war, from one day to another. So Roger might be working in 62 right now, but he's in Division 3, for example. Well, we haven't done Division 5 at all. So once we get to Division 5, we'll, find all the 4 years of the war from start to finish. So I think maybe another year or so. And with COVID, we're going a whole lot faster than we would have done otherwise, because we can really focus on this. And to me, it's just so fascinating to read. And the diseases are so different. The 19th century diseases, I have to stop and look them up so often just to make sure I've spelled them correctly, because they're so odd. And there are lots of skin diseases, for example. So this is another thing that everyone's going to find so fascinating about this information once they put it together. What are the diseases?
That is a great point. And one I'd like to circle back to as we sort of start to wrap this up. But, the way they describe their diseases, I'm sure you guys have seen this, is, intermittent fever, chronic fever, chronic diarrhea. Now all kinds of things can cause a chronic fever, all kinds of things. And the tendency we always want to, and Roger brought up debility, you see that all the time. Maybe it's what we might call PTSD, but it could just be the guy needs a break, and it was just their way of getting a guy off the front line, give him a rest for a couple of weeks, and who knows. But the tendency, and I'm guilty too, is you want to look at that chronic diarrhea and go, dysentery, he's got dysentery. Well, no, not necessarily. He could have cholera, he could have Campylobacter. There are all kinds of things that could cause chronic diarrhea. So the terms that they use were practical. Remember, this is before the germ theory, before antibiotics or anything like that. Guy comes in, what's his problem? Well, he's got chronic diarrhea. Great, okay, let's stop that. And they're going to regulate his diet. They're going to do all kinds of things to, hopefully get his stool to harden. Okay, so that's the job of the doctor back then. You've got a chronic fever. What's wrong with him? Fever? Okay, let's bring the fever down. There's no way for them to treat the underlying disease, but we want to know, don't we? We want to know, what was that? What caused that?
My great-great-grandfather died of remittent fever at Chimborazo. Have no idea.
And we want to. So there's that problem again of data and information. The data is right there. He died of chronic fever, but what does that mean? What does that mean? And it's a humbling experience. You kind of have to recognize the limits of what the historical information is. And although, that is somewhat frustrating, if that's the problem we have after this project, bring it. I want that problem, because right now I can't state with any kind of authority, even with their weird terms, what the status is. And also because these are almost certainly admission records and not necessarily medical records. I was working a guy just yesterday who came in with hemorrhoids. Flash forward 3 weeks, he died.
Wow.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he died of the world's worst case of hemorrhoids. I'm going to tell you that he probably also had something else that eventually took his life. But what was he coming to the hospital for? Hemorrhoids. So, it's tantalizing and it's frustrating. It will give us information, but not necessarily the complete picture. Hey, it's better than what we got. And we just have to recognize that's the frontier we're working with. But it goes to show you how, the story goes on. It's never going to be fully finished, even when we are. I love Jean's optimism that she thinks we're going to be done in the next year. Oh, Jean, we got to check these guys. And then once we've checked them, we're still going to have all those red lines that we still couldn't find them. We're going to have to go back to the original registers in the National Archives. And once we find them, then we got to go find, So this is going to roll
Okay.
down, and we still haven't even talked about how we want to get this out to the public once we're done. So,
Okay, fine.
yeah, I'm not constraining your optimism. I'm just saying I want everybody to understand this. We're doing it. We want to do it right, and we want to make sure it's as complete as we can. Not just because we want to show off. More importantly, we want this to be the kind of stuff that launches other research projects. And this is something we're very passionate about. We're very proud of this work. And as for me, I think this is, and I've done a lot of big research projects over my career, but this is the most excited I've ever been to do something like this, because there's just no template. We're actually writing it, and
And I don't want it to end.
exciting.
So the
It
longer
will
it
end
goes-
one day. Someday this war is going to end, Gene. There are other hospitals, though, if you want to.
Exactly.
But I just can't say enough good things about this team and about the park, which really does bolster these kind of efforts. It would be very, very sad if the park were pushing back and saying, that's taking too much of your time. What's most important is that you do X, Y, and Z. From day one, they've been like, absolutely, let's do this. And nobody told me to do it. It was just something that we wanted to do. And that kind of support is what I think really sets apart a lot of National Park Service historians. And I'm clapping myself on the back, but also giving a big hug to everyone else out there. And I know a lot of my colleagues are doing similar work, maybe not as huge, but that stuff is what we do, and it's what we love to do. And thank you all for letting us do it more than anything. That's really what gets me up in the morning. But that's sort of in a nutshell, Chimborazo Hospital's project. And I want to kick it back to John and just say thanks for letting us tell everybody about this, and hopefully catch a little bit of our enthusiasm and excitement, because it really is. And thanks again for having us.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was a pleasure to hear about this. I mean, yeah, I know I'm looking forward to this, when it's all said and done, whenever that happens. Just a few kind of general comments and one sort of follow-up question as we kind of come to a close here. I made a few notes as we were talking. Well, number one, I'm struck by how often, we have people on these videos, the point that history is so personal for so many people. And that's, why anyone gets invested in history. It becomes personal in some form or another. I mean, I can't tell you the number of historians that have been on here. And I typically start off, if I'm interviewing them, tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to this topic. And it's almost always, there's some personal dimension there. So I always like to highlight that as a theme. And then another point you were making about, the challenge of reverse diagnosing, about how, we want to know what these were. There's a fantastic book, if you want to know about Civil War medicine. It's creatively titled Civil War Medicine, Challenges and Triumphs by Alfred Bolay. And he makes a great point in there about the challenges of reverse diagnosing. We might think we know what it is, but, so much of what we have to go on is this oftentimes fragmentary and incomplete information. And, we want it to be something, but who knows? So great point. I wanted to underscore that. Brilliant. Also talking about other hospital digitization projects, we have a much smaller one that we did, or our director of research did several years ago, Terry Raymer. She published a book. It's called One Vast Hospital, and there's also a digital component on our website, civilwarmed.org. We'll make sure we post that link in the comments here.
Cool.
But it's all of the and it's a little bit different record set than you are working with. It's all of the soldiers that were treated in Frederick after the Battle of Antietam. And that research was also done in the National Archives circa 2002. So it was a little more painstaking than what you all have been doing. Not to say that your work hasn't been painstaking, but Terry and company were working with a little bit more limited resources, but of course it's a bit shorter of a list. So, but that is out there. But to my knowledge, that's the only other, extensive patient list that I'm aware of that's out there. There's tons more work to be done if someone ever feels like sitting down and doing the drudgery here, which is, no small task, which is why there aren't very many out there. And then finally, the point you mentioned that came up about phonetic spelling, which I think is fascinating. It gives us an insight into how, how they might have talked, some of these pronunciations, like I think you mentioned Merland, which, you don't think about very often, but there's a great database that I heard historian Stephen Barry talk about once, called Private Voices. And it's a collection of letters written by illiterate or semi-literate people that they dictated to people. And it's a lot of this kind of speaking. It's easier to read them out loud than to read them as they're spelled, because it's, it's a disaster. So there's all kinds of interesting things about language and pronunciation that that you will, we'll probably be able to glean from all of this once it's done. So anyway, I think all that's very interesting. This is a great project. And the one question which you may have addressed, but I wanted to make sure it came through, famously or infamously, I guess, Confederate medical records, there aren't very many of these. They regrettably burn up in Richmond. And, the answer might be that these are admission records, or maybe they were kept at the hospital. But how does this survive? How do we still have this?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because I ran into this wall literally when, I mentioned going up to the National Archives way back in the day. And what was very clear to me was that anything that was in the medical department, so the Surgeon General's records and the medical director's records, had burned up, because that building was right next to Capitol Square, and that's where the evacuation fire was. And that building caught fire very, very late in the day of April 3rd, 1865. And it's one of these moments you can always prove that time travel never gets developed, because it wouldn't be hard for a bunch of historians to go right there at a very particular moment with a bunch of fire extinguishers and keep this from happening.
So you're telling me we were this close to that not happening? Oh.
Yes. It was one of the last things to burn. And, when it happened, it would be, the same effect for historians as if the Pentagon burned with all the records inside. And so, unfortunately, we don't have top-down records, which is very frustrating, because, especially Surgeon General Moore, who was really officious, was micromanaging, dictating all kinds of stuff. I'd love to see it. But the hospital records, which were not centralized, like the individual hospitals themselves, which were scattered all around the city, by and large, they survived. There is the other large hospital in Richmond, Winder Hospital, which by bed capacity was actually larger than Chimborazo. Those records do not survive, and I don't know why. I've got nothing. It didn't burn down. In fact, it became the headquarters for the military occupation authorities when the U.S. Army came in. So maybe that was part of it too. They just scattered them. Who knows? But we don't have those. We do have Chimborazos. And the other good news is that they kept the letters sent and received books. So you can sort of, in a backdoor kind of way, reconstruct what the medical director and the Surgeon General were saying to the individual hospitals. You just can't find them all in one place, which is frustrating. But I think there are some workarounds that somebody really wants to go deep, and start hunting through all these hospital records that are in the National Archives. We might get some other fascinating stuff that's beyond. I've got enough big projects right now, so don't hold your breath. But that is, I think, doable. I think that is doable. But it's never going to be as nice as just going to one collection in the National Archives, having them pull the boxes, and there they all are. But in some cases, we're never going to get them back. I'm not holding my breath for somebody to pop a trunk and there's Winder Hospital's records. I think they're gone, and that is a tragedy to me. But we do what we can, and so we're working with the other big hospital, Chimborazo, and I think it'll be a pretty good sample size, and a lot will come out of it.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, and so if I know you're kind of a ways along and COVID definitely adds a layer of challenge, but if someone is watching this like, this is really cool, I'd love to get involved, how would you recommend they do that?
Well, right now, I think we're kind of at carrying capacity with what we can do right now, in terms of uh, transcribing. Roger's got the microfilm machine. I only have one. Me and Gene do the checking, and that is a full-time job, I assure you. So it's what Gene does is she goes and finds her guys. I'm working on my guys in the background. When she gets done with hers, she will make a line in red that is a problem child, and then I'll go and try to hunt her problem children, which are, I mean, she's good at this. So, if she can't find it, it means it's going to take me a while. So, that sort of slows down the process right now. And I'm not joking when I said to attempt to slow her down. She's so good at this. I sent her the entire state of South Carolina because I gave her Tennessee thinking I'd have 2 weeks where I could, try to catch up. No, she was done in like 5 days. So I'm trying to pace this out a little bit. But if anybody is interested in sort of joining the checking effort, you can email me. You can email Bert. He's our volunteer coordinator, and we can see what we can do to get you involved. But like I say, right now, I think we are kind of at a nice keel there where we're humming along and things are moving. But believe me, we want people to get excited about this. We want people to anticipate when this is done, what's going to come out of it and what's possible. I think I love that I can't even imagine what will come of this stuff. And that's just great.
There's something delightful about that, not even being able to imagine what this might be like when we're getting closer and closer to, when it will, come to fruition. So this has all been fantastic. It's been a pleasure to chat with all of you. I hope our viewers out there enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you like this video. Make sure you share the video. Tell your friends about it. Tell other historians about it. Tell everybody about it. Because this is a really, really cool project, and it's going to be fantastic when it does come to life down the road. Yeah, stay in touch. We're going to continue doing videos on this channel, on the National Museum of Civil War Medicine Facebook page, YouTube channel. Like us on Facebook, like Richmond National Battlefield Park on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channels to stay up to date with all the stuff that we're doing. And if you can, become a member of the museum to continue to support research like this. And thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it.